Hi everyone, and welcome to an overview of family counseling. This week you only have two chapters to read, chapters 6 and 7, but they're very important chapters because the information about systems theory and some of the early theorists that those chapters reference has been known to show up on your state licensure exams, such as the National Counseling Exam and then also the comprehensive exam, the CPCE. So this information that we cover during this week's class goes into more detail than the general counseling theories class or fundamentals, whichever title it was when you took it. This goes into a little bit more information, a little bit more detail about systems theory. When you think about the history of family counseling and how it has evolved over time, it's important to understand that early family counselors such as John Bell, were really influenced by some of the models of group counseling that were already being used in the field. And group counseling was important because it focused on relationships and ways that people interact with each other. But it was also focused on the here and now, what happens during the process of a family counsel, or excuse me, a group counseling session, rather than historical events. And so that made it not completely applicable to working with families because families carry around lots and lots of history, and there are problems that repeat themselves within generations of families over time. There are problems in families that stem back to unresolved issues with people who are not even in living any longer within the families. So a historical perspective is important to the work with family counseling in a way that group counseling is not. Early family counseling models were also influenced by some other theories that had been used in engineering and mathematics, and those are the concepts of general systems theory, cybernetics, and information theory. And those kind of came together to create what was called a communications model. And something important that came out of the understanding of this communications model and applying with families is the idea that people are communicating all the time. Even if they're not trying to communicate, they're still communicating. And not only are people communicating all the time, but there's two levels to every message that's being delivered. There's the content message, that's what is being stated in the verbal communication, but then there is also what's called a command function, and that's the kind of meta communication, the subtle additional communication that's being communicated. And for healthy communication and in healthy relationships, those two things are really one and the same. But problematic relationships, there's often what's the content message is sometimes drowned out by that command message, which communicates something more about the nature of the relationship, not just what is communicated, and or not just the content. And that's really where people sometimes maybe try to assert power or be passive aggressive in their communication. So early models of family counseling were beginning to be more complex in understanding how these patterns of communication impacted individuals' mental health and then also the overall healthy functioning of the family. Some other important things that came out of these early workings of family counseling, the idea of using the systems and these different processes of communication as metaphors for ways that people interact with each other. And what they emphasized is that families often have these unspoken rules and roles, and that influences all of us. There's no escaping from that. And so when family members play one role with each other, such as the grumpy father, the overbearing mother, that because that's a role that they're playing and not their core self, what's helpful hopeful and optimistic about it is that they can learn to play new roles that are based on more authentic definitions of themselves and who their core structure. And so family counseling can be a vehicle for teaching family members to act in these new roles. And so that's a more optimistic view of human nature than a pathological disease model that says, kind of somebody's broken, it's going to be real difficult to fix them. This is more optimistic in that it says, well, we play roles and we can be taught to play new roles. Other concepts that are important to family counselors since its evolution, and these continue to be very important to this day, is the concept of family development. Individual development was being studied by Piaget and Erikson. How does one person develop from infancy over time? But this idea of the family is also a unit developing over time began to be something that was studied by researchers and theorists. And so while the family is a unit developing over time, the individuals within the family are also themselves following their own path of individual development, and that is helping the family to propel with that forward developing motion that it has. So the family's development is acted on by some societal factors, attitudes, taboos, expectations, labels, issues that within families that become loaded issues, that real painful emotional touch points. The family is always moving through time, and then it's also being influenced by cultural and society issues that are happening. And it's important to consider the specific cultural influences within any one family and the legacy that has had on those family members as a group. So the particular legacy of certain ethnic groups, certain gender roles, and so forth. Something that was another big shift for systems theorists and early family counselors was the focus of the intervention. So early social workers had often worked with families, but because of the social work philosophy, they believed that external environmental issues were causing dysfunction or dissatisfaction on the well-being of families and the individuals within those families. So the focus of their intervention then was on changing that environment or helping connect the family to a more positive environment or providing resources to the family that will make their environment better. So the environment was the really big focus for social workers. Then within individual counseling and psychology, it was believed that, or it is believed that individuals can often have distorted thoughts that will lead to irrational beliefs, and that those irrational beliefs cause them to act in ways that are or are not functional. So the focus of the intervention within psychology and counseling was on changing individuals and things that were going on with individuals' cognitions and feelings, developing insight, changing behaviors, but very individual focused. So systems work took a different approach because it wasn't just focused on the environment, it wasn't just focused on the individual, but it was focused on relationships between people and the interactions in between those people and the way that those interactions impacted the people in that relationship. And so if that was the focus, then the intervention model would be on that relationship. So you're targeting your therapeutic interventions on the relationship and on the interaction. You're not looking for resources, you're not trying to change one person's perspective, but you're helping at least two people, maybe more, be able to relate and interact with each other in a more positive and functional way. Okay, so symptom development within the systems perspective would say that symptoms, and by symptoms I mean problematic behaviors or negative thoughts and feelings that the family as a group has, as one person in the family is exhibiting and bearing for the entire family system, that these most frequently occur at times of transition. And that's something that I brought up at our first class session, that when there's an expansion, a contraction, a realignment, an entry, an exit to that family system, people coming, going, leaving, changing their positions, that often is when symptoms of psychological or distress will occur. And it's important that when you're working with families to take a look at what those transitions that they're going through, how they kind of unsettle the family and cause a period of disequilibrium. Many of these terms, such as disequilibrium, are talked about in your book, and it's going to be important for you to be able to define those. So it's important to keep in mind that even when a family goes through a positive change, such as a marriage or a child moving off to college, that there can still be a negative impact on that family as they go through that period of disequilibrium. They need to reorganize, regroup, relate to each other in a new way, and that's difficult. So we want to know, well, when we're assessing families, what are the things that we're looking for? And when we start working with families and we try to put our finger on, well, what is the problem that this family's having, it can be a little bit confusing. But some things that we want to look for are the well-being or distress of each of the individual family members. We want to assess the quality of the relationship between the people in that family that are parents. We want to look at the relationship that they had with their parents. So that would be if we had a family with mom and dad, then we would want to look at mom and dad's relationship to their own parents. Then we want to look at the quality of the relationships between the parents in our family unit and the children within our family unit. We want to assess the quality of relationships between siblings. We want to look at the balance of life stress and social supports that are available to each of those, the parents, the children, and then the family member. And finally, and this is probably one of the most important, is we want to look at the quality of the relationship between the parents when there is a two-parent family system. So I can't really think of any time that I ever worked with a family that was having a problem with a child or an adolescent where it didn't cause stress to the couple subsystem, to the two parents who were working together to be the figureheads of that family. Even if they had a positive, committed relationship to each other as a couple, they still experienced a great deal of stress when a child or adolescent was going through turmoil. But more often than not, what I saw in family counseling was that the relationship between those parents was skewed. One parent was doing it all, one parent was detached, or the problems that they were having with their children had caused a lot of discord between them as a couple. And so it's one of the first goals in family counseling, once you've assessed all of these different 6 items, is to try to bring that parental hierarchy, the parent structure, back together so that they're on the same team. Okay, and just to wrap up for this segment of the PowerPoint, there's a McMaster model of viewing healthy family functioning that's useful in terms of doing a more in-depth assessment of families. You want to look at families and how they're handling the basic task areas, such as being able to provide food, shelter, clothing, transportation, and money to all the family members. You want to look at how they're handling each of the developmental needs of the family members. How are they adjusting to someone at each of the members at different stages of their lives, and how is the family managing crises such as illness and addictions. You want to further look at the ways that the family solves problems, the ways they communicate with each other, the roles and boundaries of each of the family members. You want to look at how they respond to each other in an emotional way. You want to look at the way that they exhibit empathy towards each other, and you want to look at how they influence or control the behaviors of the family members within that unit. So some of this might seem kind of vague right now because we're not applying it to a specific family, but keep this slide in mind, because when we start doing the family role plays in class, this is one of the things that we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking a look at some assessments, and then next week when you view a clip of a family counseling video and write a case note about it, these assessment areas within the last 2 slides that I've talked about are some things that you can include in your case note.